You want the short version first? Fine, she parked a shiny black SUV in the middle of my equipment yard and smiled like she owned the place, and that's when I stopped being polite. It sounds small when I say it like that, like a parking fight, but it wasn't about a spot. It was about a line my granddad staked out with his hands and sweat, a line people like Marjorie Lane kept trying to erase. I'm telling you this because no one would listen at first, and then everybody watched. My name's Cal Mercer. My family's been on this ridge for 3 generations, the kind of place with a sagging barn, a porch that moans in winter, and a mailbox that still wears my grandfather's nameplate. We called the place Cedar Run long before the subdivision rolled down from the highway and carved its neat lawns into our view. They built their houses in a straight row, painted each fence the same beige, held meetings about paint and parking, and whether a bluebird house matched the HOA rules that never applied to the Hillweed farm since before anyone bothered with HOA bylaws. I never joined. I never wanted to. I like my dirt. I liked knowing where my property ended and someone else's started. That was the point. Marjorie was the kind of woman who smells like citrus cleaner and always carries a clipboard. She moved into the neighborhood 5 years after Cedar Run started feeling crowded, right when people started looking for someone to boss around. She volunteered for the board, then she ran the board, then she ran the show Voices Hush when the board passed a rule, and she loved that quiet. Complaints at first were little things. My tractor at dusk made too much noise. My dogs chased a tennis ball into the street. My fence color was untenable. Each letter was a little puncture, so I stapled my mail to a nail and carried on. But those punctures turned into cuts. One spring morning, I found 20 feet of my old split-rail fence knocked down, saplings broken like toothpicks. The security cam over the shed showed a dark SUV barreling across the yard at dawn, headlights like 2 small moons, and then Marjorie stepping out with a phone, snapping pictures like she'd caught me stealing from myself. I called the sheriff. The deputy took the report, wrote down license plate numbers, made a face like he wished paperwork could do more than hold people's hands accountable. That was the moment I knew this wasn't garden variety neighbor nonsense. This was deliberate, and it had a face. I called my lawyer, but first I called Marcus, a retired county deputy who'd once pulled me out of a ditch and then retired because he was tired of politics. Marcus came over with this old coffee thermos and said, "You document, Cal. You don't get hot, and you don't get proud, you document." That was his line, document. I called Dave, the neighbor who does engineering for a living, and he came down with a folding ruler and an easy smile and measured our property line like you'd measure a recipe, precise and patient. We found a boundary acknowledgement, an old note Marjorie had signed 2 years earlier at a community meeting, thanking Cedar Run for allowing the view over a disputed corner. She'd signed it, and she'd tried to pretend she hadn't. That paper felt like a lever. I'm not a man who likes confrontation for the sake of it. Mostly I like to let the seasons decide things. But when somebody starts driving across your land and grinning like it's a joke, you either let them keep joking or you stop the joke. So I set it up. Not with malice, with planning. We put up clear signs, legal and polite. Private equipment yard, authorized vehicles only. I put a camera on a new pole, angling it toward the gap in the fence. I told the sheriff about the signs and the previous incident. I told Marcus to be around, told Dave to bring the measuring sticks, told Jorge, the only one who knew how to run the loader without romancing it, to be on standby, with a clear head and no theatrics. Marjorie ignored the signs like they were suggestions. She and a couple of HOA board members drove her black SUV into my yard the morning of the meeting, the car glinting in the sun, the people in it smiling like they were about to enjoy a picnic in someone else's backyard. I remember the way her shoes clicked on the gravel when she got out, a woman who believed in small cruelties dressed as civic duty. I walked out to meet them carrying a clipboard of my own property deeds, notices, photos, and I felt the way a man feels when he's about to tell the truth to someone who thinks they've been telling it first. "Marjorie," I said, "you can't park there." She looked at me like I'd used a word from a foreign language. "This is community space," she said, quoting the HOA like it was scripture. "You can't just tell people where to park." I pointed at the sign. I pointed at the camera. I slid the boundary acknowledgement across the hood. "You signed this," I said. "You invited yourself onto our property. You've driven through the fence before." I kept my voice even. I kept my hands where they could be seen. Other people were watching. Neighbors peeking from porches, Marcus leaning against the pickup like he'd known since morning this was coming. Jorge standing behind the loader with his hands folded. "Well, make me move it," Marjorie said, all bright teeth and the kind of smile that's prearranged to hide what comes next. That's when I realized words wouldn't be enough. I'd warned. I'd documented all the things Marcus told me to do, and she'd chosen to ignore it. So I made a different choice. Jorge fired up the loader. The machine answered like a living thing, diesel groan, hydraulic hiss, the kind of sound that reminds you how small your body is next to the world's heavy things. Marjorie's smile flickered. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice high now. Not because she cared about the car, but because her control was sliding. "You move it, or I move it," I said. I felt the words like a hinge snapping shut. The loader's fork slid under the bumper, careful, slow, and I watched Marjorie's face as the vehicle left the ground. It wasn't violent, that's important, it was a deliberate, mechanical elevation, like lifting a puzzle piece to show everyone the picture underneath. She grabbed for the hood, then stopped, because cameras are kind of popular nowadays and the sheriff's cruiser was turning down the road like somebody had finally realized the script had a different ending. Neighbors pulled out their phones. Someone said, "Cal, you can't." Someone else said, "About time." The sheriff stepped up, badge reflecting sunlight, and listened to the facts. Signs posted, cameras recording, the property acknowledgement signed by Marjorie, the previous damage, witness statements. He asked Jorge to lower the car carefully and towed the vehicle to the roadside until ownership could be established and the matter sorted. Marjorie walked off with a hand covering her mouth, the kind of gesture people make when they realize a joke is no longer theirs to tell. What followed was a slow, messy civil thing that doesn't make for pretty headlines. There were charges filed for trespass and property damage from the earlier fence incident, restitution for the repairs, a hearing where Marjorie's habit of bending the HOA rules into a personal power play came to light. The board had to answer questions about why fines had been levied with no due process, why certain members received preferential treatment, why a budget line made its way into a personal account, adult problems, adult paperwork, adult consequences. She stepped down from the presidency in a meeting that smelled like stale coffee and defeat. The board voted to audit past fines and to tighten up how rules were enforced. People who'd been hushed started talking. The neighborhood felt different, like air after a thunderstorm. I won't pretend it was satisfying in the way people imagine winning is. I felt relief, sure, the kind that lands in your chest and leaves a bruise of tired. I felt ashamed at how quickly my pride got tied up with other people's livelihoods. I didn't enjoy the way Marjorie's life unraveled. I was relieved that my family's land and the truth about it were intact. Months later, she left an apology on my porch, handwritten, small, the kind you can't mass produce, and it read like someone who discovered the outline of their own arrogance and wanted, for once, to redraw it. I kept the note because memories should be cataloged. The cameras stayed. The new fence went up, stronger, straighter, and a little less nostalgic than the one my grandfather built, but it did the job. We put lights by the driveway and a little plaque with our name on it, because sometimes property wants a sign more than people want words. We planted a row of maples to block the view of the manicured lawns, not out of spite, but because we like trees and because shade is a practical thing. When people ask me why I did it, why I brought a loader into what could have been a bad headline, I tell them this. Lines still matter. Not just the painted ones on a map, but the ones your family taught you about. Say what you mean, protect what's yours, and when someone starts moving your line without asking, stand where you planted yourself. There's a humility in that stance, and a responsibility. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was trying to stop humiliation from happening to my neighbors and my land. I don't expect everyone to agree. Some folks cheered and called it poetic justice. Others thought I'd gone too far. That's the thing about community fights, they reveal more about the neighborhood than about a single person. So I'll leave you with this. Have you ever watched an everyday person push back and thought they were being dramatic? Or have you ever been that person who realized the line had shifted and you had to choose whether to redraw it? Drop in the comments which side you're on. Defend me, defend Marjorie, or tell me where the line should be drawn. Tell me about the time your backyard became someone else's battleground. If you like this, hit subscribe for more real stories where the hero's not perfect and the ending isn't tidy, it's just honest.